You see, there is something very curious happening right now, and most people haven't noticed it yet. The ones who have awakened, the ones who have begun to see through the game, are simply vanishing. Not with drama, not with announcements, not with manifestos. They are just quietly stepping back, fading into the edges, choosing silence over the noise. And if you have felt this, pull yourself. If you have been wondering why you can no longer stand the conversations, the parties, the performances, then what I am about to tell you may bring you great relief, because this withdrawal is not a sickness. It is not antisocial behavior. It is actually the most natural thing in the world when someone wakes up. Let me explain what I mean by waking up. I'm not talking about reading a few books on philosophy or having a nice idea about oneness. I am talking about that moment when the veil drops and you see that almost everything people are doing is a kind of sleepwalking. They are playing roles, repeating lines, moving through routines, all while completely unaware that they are asleep. Now, when you're asleep yourself, this is no problem. You fit right in. You can have conversations about nothing and feel perfectly fine. You can worry about what other people think and believe that matters. You can chase after things that have no real substance and call it success. But the moment you wake up, the moment you really see what is happening, everything changes. Suddenly you are like a person who has walked out of a movie theater into the bright daylight. And when you try to go back into the theater, when you try to sit down and watch the flickering images on the screen again, you cannot do it because you know it is just light and shadow. You know it is not real. This is what is happening to awakening people right now. They are finding that they can no longer participate in the collective dream. Not because they are superior or enlightened or better than anyone else, but because their nervous system simply cannot tolerate it anymore. You see, society operates on a kind of agreement, an agreement to pretend that the roles we play are who we really are, to pretend that the opinions we hold are actually ours and not something we absorb from the atmosphere, to pretend that all this urgency and seriousness and striving is leading somewhere important, and everyone must participate in this pretending for it to work. It is like a play where all the actors must stay in character. But when someone wakes up, they break character. They forget their lines. They start looking directly at the audience, and this makes everyone very uncomfortable. Because the awakened person can see what is really going on. They can see the fear beneath the confidence. They can see the emptiness beneath the busyness. They can see that most of what people are fighting about has nothing to do with what they think they are fighting about. When someone points at another group and says, "Those people are the problem," the awakened person sees that this is just a way of avoiding one's own darkness. When someone posts their outrage in the public square, the awakened person sees that this is just unconscious material seeking a target. When society divides itself into us and them, the awakened person sees that both sides are shadows boxing with each other. And once you see this, you cannot unsee it. You cannot go back to taking it all seriously. You cannot participate in the blame, the judgment, and the righteous anger, because you understand that it is all just one big projection, one massive game of pointing at others to avoid looking at ourselves. So what does the awakened person do? They withdraw. Not because they hate people, but because staying in the game requires them to betray what they have seen. Every conversation requires them to pretend they do not see what they see. Every social gathering requires them to perform a version of themselves that no longer exists. Every interaction asks them to be less than they have become. And eventually, the soul says, "Enough. Stop pretending. Stop performing. Stop translating your depth into shallow terms just to maintain belonging. Go where you can breathe." Now, I want to be very clear about something. This is not spiritual bypassing. This is not running away from responsibility. This is not some kind of escapism where you go hide in a cave because life is too hard. No, this is something else entirely. This is the recognition that staying in unconscious environments actually damages consciousness. It is like asking a plant to grow in the dark. It can survive for a while, but eventually it will wither. The awakened person discovers that being around unconsciousness is not just uncomfortable, it is depleting. Every time you are surrounded by people who are asleep, you have to work very hard to maintain your own wakefulness. You have to constantly filter out the projections. You have to hold your center while chaos swirls around you. You have to remain clear while everyone else is foggy. And this takes tremendous energy, invisible energy, that no one sees or appreciates. You're doing psychological work that others are not even aware needs to be done. And after a while, you realize that you are spending all your energy just trying to stay conscious in environments that are actively pulling you back to sleep. So you make a choice. You choose consciousness over belonging. You choose truth over acceptance. You choose your own inner clarity over the approval of people who cannot see what you see. And this is when the disappearing begins. First, you leave social media because you realize it is a machine designed to keep people unconscious. Every scroll is an invitation to judgment, comparison, outrage, distraction. For someone who is awakened, it feels like swimming in sewage. So, you simply stop. You delete the applications. You stop checking. And suddenly you have hours of life returned to you. Then you start leaving social circles, not with anger or announcements. You just stop showing up because you realize that most social gatherings are performances. People performing their success, their happiness, their opinions, and you can no longer perform. Your authentic self has emerged, and it has no interest in pretending. Then you leave certain relationships, not because you stop caring about people, but because some relationships were built on who you used to be, on the sleeping version of yourself. And now that you have awakened, there is no common ground anymore. You are speaking different languages. You are living in different worlds. Then you leave your career. This is often the most difficult one, because society has convinced us that our work is our identity. But the awakened person can no longer perform the role their job requires. They can no longer pretend to care about things that do not matter. They can no longer participate in systems they see through. And so they leave, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. But they leave because staying would mean dying in a different way. It would mean killing the consciousness they have worked so hard to develop. Now, let me tell you what happens in this withdrawal, because it is not what most people think. Most people imagine that disappearing from society means becoming isolated, depressed, lonely. But for the awakened person, the opposite happens. In solitude, they finally stop being lonely. You see, there is a difference between loneliness and aloneness. Loneliness is what you feel when you are surrounded by people who do not see you. Aloneness is what you feel when you are finally free to be yourself. When the awakened person withdraws, they discover something extraordinary. They discover that they were never really with other people, even when they were physically surrounded, because real connection requires consciousness meeting consciousness. And when you are awake in a room full of sleeping people, there is no one to meet. But in solitude, in that quiet space away from the noise and the performance and the projection, you meet yourself. Really meet yourself. Not the version you have been performing, not the role you have been playing, but the actual living, breathing consciousness that you are. And this is not lonely. This is coming home. In this space, you can finally hear your own thoughts without the constant interference of other people's opinions. You can finally feel your own feelings without absorbing everyone else's emotions. You can finally discover what you actually want, what you actually believe, who you actually are. This is what I call the hermit phase. And it is absolutely necessary for anyone who is awakening. You cannot transform while maintaining all your old connections and commitments. You cannot become a butterfly while still living as a caterpillar. There must be a withdrawal, a cocooning, a time of deep internal work. And during this time, the awakened person is not escaping. They are integrating. They are processing all the unconsciousness they have absorbed over the years. They are healing the wounds that came from pretending to be someone they were not. They are developing the strength to stand in their truth even when everyone around them is still asleep. This is hard work, much harder than staying asleep. Because when you are awake, you can no longer blame others for your suffering. You can no longer project your darkness onto convenient targets. You can no longer avoid your own depths by staying busy and distracted. You must face everything, all the fear, all the pain, all the ugliness you have been avoiding. And you must do this alone, because no one else can do it for you. But here is the beautiful thing. Once you have done this work, once you have integrated your shadow and found your authentic self, you are no longer dependent on others for your sense of reality. You are no longer looking for approval or validation or belonging. You have found something much more valuable. You have found yourself, and from this place, if you choose to return to society, you return differently, not to participate in the unconsciousness, but to offer something else, a different frequency, a different possibility. You become what I call a border dweller, someone who lives on the edge between the sleeping world and the awakened world. You are present but not absorbed, available but not dependent, engaged but not entangled. You might work with individuals who are beginning to wake up. You might create art that speaks to the depths. You might write words that serve as maps for other disappearing souls. You might simply live your life in such an authentic way that others begin to wonder if there is another way to be. But you never return to the mainstream. You cannot, because once you have tasted consciousness, you cannot go back to sleep. Once you have touched your authentic self, you cannot go back to performing a role. Once you have seen through the game, you cannot pretend it is real. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. Is this not selfish? Should we not stay engaged and try to help wake others up? Should we not work to change the system from within? And here is what I want to say to that: you cannot give what you do not have. If you have not fully awakened yourself, if you have not done your own inner work, if you have not integrated your own shadow, then you have nothing real to offer others. You will just be one more sleeping person trying to wake up other sleeping people. You will just be projecting your own unconsciousness while claiming to be enlightened. You will just be spreading more confusion while thinking you are bringing clarity. No, the most loving thing you can do is to awaken fully yourself, to do the deep work of integration, to become genuinely conscious. And then, from that place of real awakening, you can be available to others who are ready. Understand this. Most people are not ready. Most people do not want to wake up. They want to keep dreaming their dreams, playing their games, performing their roles. And that is perfectly fine. That is their right. Your job is not to wake them up. Your job is to wake up yourself, and then to be available quietly, gently, without force or evangelism, for those who are beginning to stir in their sleep. This is why the awakened are disappearing. They are going where they can be real, where they can breathe, where they can continue developing their consciousness without constantly having to defend it or explain it or dim it to make others comfortable. They are finding each other in small circles, in quiet spaces, on the margins. They are creating little pockets of consciousness in a sea of sleep. They are building alternative ways of living that do not require them to betray themselves. And this is not abandonment. This is actually the most responsible thing they can do, because the collective does not need more people participating in its unconsciousness. It needs people who have done the hard work of waking up. It needs living examples of another way to be. It needs individuals who have found their authentic selves. So if you are feeling the pull to disappear, if you are finding it harder and harder to participate in normal society, if you are losing interest in the games and the performances and the noise, then listen to that pull. It is your soul calling you home. It is your consciousness asking for the space it needs to fully emerge. Do not fight it. Do not feel guilty about it. Do not try to force yourself to stay engaged with things that drain you. Give yourself permission to withdraw. Give yourself permission to be alone. Give yourself permission to disappear for a while. This is not permanent. You will return when you are ready. But you will return as someone different, someone whole, someone authentic, someone who can offer real consciousness rather than just more unconscious performance. And in the meantime, use your solitude well. Do the inner work. Integrate your shadow. Find your authentic self. Develop your consciousness, because this is what the world actually needs. Not more people pretending to be awake, but people who have genuinely awakened. The spiritually awake are disappearing because they must. Because consciousness cannot develop in unconscious environments. Because authenticity cannot emerge while performing a role. Because truth cannot be found while participating in collective lies. So let them go. Or rather, if you are one of them, let yourself go. Withdraw without guilt. Disappear without apology. Be alone without loneliness. And trust that you are following an ancient pattern, a necessary pattern, the pattern that every awakening person must follow. The caterpillar must dissolve in the cocoon before it can become the butterfly. The seed must break apart in the dark soil before it can become the tree. The awakened person must withdraw from society before they can return with something real to offer. This is not the end. This is the beginning of genuine consciousness in a world that desperately needs it. But that consciousness must be developed in solitude before it can be shared in community. So disappear if you must. And know that in your disappearing, you are actually preparing something the sleeping world cannot yet see, something it will need when it begins to wake up. You are not abandoning anyone. You are pioneering. You are going ahead to prepare the way. You are becoming what others will eventually need you to be. And that is the most loving thing you can possibly do.